Hey there, it's Robin, and you're listening to Healthy Habits for a Healthier Home. I'm here to help you create a healthier life, one simple shift at a time. If you're a mama ready to ditch toxins, clean up your family's nutrition, and build daily habits that support your well-being, you're definitely in the right place. Each episode is packed not only with education, but practical tips and tools to help you transform your health and your home without that feeling of overwhelm. So let's take this journey together to create a thriving, low-tox home for you and your family. If you're ready, say, I am ready. Now let's get into this episode. Hey y'all, welcome back. We have Nurse Nicole with us today. And I was just telling her, I was thinking today about the first time that I met her, which was last year, almost a year ago, on the Capitol stairs in Tallahassee. We were there going around and we were advocating for different things. I was there for actually food dyes. She was there more for vaccine injured from the COVID vaccine. But I remember when I saw her, I just had to meet her because I had been following her and I really like what she stands for. So welcome, Nicole. How are you doing?
I'm very good. I'm so glad to be here. How are you?
I'm well. It's the first week of back to school, back to work, all the people getting back to their respective places. So I feel like the routine's starting up again, which I like routine. So I'm excited about that. So I have gotten to know you over the year. You've really walked me into some territory that was foreign. I went to my first town hall meeting because of you about the water and that was really interesting because you're like, oh, it's going to be super low key. And I'm like, this is not low key. There's like 40 million people there. So that was an interesting step for me. But all of the things that I've learned through you have really been helpful in opening my eyes to certain things that I kind of thought but didn't know. So I would love to just start with your story because you are at the heart of everything, a nurse. And so why did you get into that field and kind of where did things start to shift for you?
Yeah, so I've been a nurse roughly 20 years, predominantly in the cardiac field of nursing. I grew up actually wanting to be a pediatrician, ironically enough. And as I was going through studies in high school and in early college years, I realized that the physician route was not actually the best for me. I like being at the forefront of patients and families. And ironically, God always, knows well before we do that probably was not going to be the best outcome for me. So I went to school and got my nursing degree. I originally was an LPN and then I went back for my RN. I went back and I got my bachelor's. And then during the pandemic, I went and got my certified legal nurse consultant, which is a certification to help on the legal aspect of healthcare. And so really for me, I've always had this ability to connect with individuals, really kind of get on their level and be able to be empathetic and guide individuals to understand information that may be a little hard to digest at times. And I've always pride myself on being neutral and being able to give information that the patient and family can make the best decision for themselves. Ultimately, I have very strong feelings about things that we'll probably get into, but at the end of the day, I took an oath to do no harm in healthcare, and we are patient advocates and educators. And our job is to not tell you what to do, but to guide you with the best information, which includes informed consent and knowing what your rights are as a patient. And so during the pandemic, I saw that completely stripped away. Everything I had learned had been pushed to the side. And I quickly saw how the protocols and things that we had previously been taught were basically said no longer. And we were receiving different guidelines from the administration at the time that we refer to as deadly hospital protocols, in addition to the vaccine rollout, as I was a transplant nurse at the time, a heart transplant nurse, and that population was one of the first ones to receive the vaccine because of their immunocompromised status. And also, in order to get a transplant, you have to be vaccinated. And at that time in Florida, that did include the COVID-19 vaccine. When I saw what was happening to those patients and how the protocols were being implemented and causing more harm than good, I decided to come forward and speak on a local and state level to let them know what I was seeing and trying to sound the alarm that there was harm being done and, what are we going to do about it? And unfortunately, at that time, I was gaslit, mocked, coerced. I received death threats. There were a lot of things that were thrown my way because anybody speaking out in healthcare was basically a sitting target. So since then, I've now dedicated myself to continue at a local and state level to make sure Floridians have the right to choose when it comes to medical freedom. And that includes when we were going and speaking for 6 months straight about fluoride and removing that out of the water, in addition to the COVID-19 vaccine mandates. And currently this year, our focus is ending all vaccine mandates in the state of Florida.
So that was a lot. And so I want to just kind of go back because there's so many little things I want to touch on. First of all, um, to be a nurse, I've not been a nurse, but to be a nurse and be on the receiving end of a nurse, I find it extremely heartwarming to hear you say that you want to give patients all of the information.
Right.
And I've been in hospital settings a lot. I'm a caregiver to my mom, and I was a caregiver to my dad. And the unbelievable fighting that I had to do constantly being in there and telling them what was happening and not accepting, it's extremely draining. And it's also frightening because I don't have a background in that, but I knew right from wrong. I knew that
Right.
my mom couldn't make decisions. And I didn't understand even during COVID, there was a couple of times where she had to go in and, I kept having to really repeat myself that I am her voice. She does not have the voice any longer to speak and make decisions for herself. So you cannot talk to her about these things because she's
Right.
going to say something to you, but she's not competent enough to make
Right.
those decisions. So that was every time I feel like we went to the hospital, there was always something like eye opening. So to hear you say that, not only I'm sure you're an amazing nurse, but having that bedside manner of really advocating for the patient. In my experience, I've had probably 3 or 4 nurses in all the years that I've been in and out with my parents. So, I wish more nurses would get your kind of education or your desire to do those things and not be afraid. I think a lot of them are afraid to speak up. And I want to go back because you said you got a certification in, tell me again, what was that? A certification in like the legal?
Certified legal nurse consultant.
Okay,
It's a
so you can help people what? What with that certification, what
there's
does that
a
allow you to do?
there's a lot of in-depth things that I don't use it for, but essentially you are a nurse that has an extensive background in a specific specialty or generalization of healthcare, and you are usually sought out by insurance companies or law firms to essentially work and either work for a plaintiff or a defense side to represent cases. Some of them can be medical malpractice cases, toxic tort, product liability. And I have chosen at this point not to go into the legal side with law firms, if you will, but instead using my background to help teach people just what you're saying. The fact that gone are the days where a lot of people in healthcare have empathy for many reasons and lack a lot of the knowledge and intelligence on what it means to not always toe the line when it comes to the standardization of care. Just because somebody says it's right for someone does not mean it's right for all. And where there is risk, there must be choice. And so the certified legal nurse consultant background helps me teach individuals what it's like to have a medical advocate at all times, to know what your rights are, to know about informed consent, to ask questions, and to know that no is a complete sentence, in addition to how you can navigate the broken healthcare system, whether it's at a doctor's office, an outpatient clinic, or a hospital setting. Like you said, unfortunately, it's a rarity now to have individuals that are slowing down enough to first listen. I always teach and tell people that the patient and family know themselves best, and we are there to guide. Just because a doctor comes in and says that this is something you're going to do does not mean that that's what we're going to do. However, multiple different generations will come forward and kind of present how they take information from a physician. And most of our elderly population does believe that the physicians are not meaning to do harm and that they know best. And unfortunately, A lot of times these things are ruled by guidelines and certain things that the physicians are required to do in order to receive compensation and or get the hospital reimbursement. And so what we call it is a standardization of care. But as we've learned, especially since the pandemic, it is not a one size fits all model. And especially when it comes to vaccines and certain things, we really have to tailor that care. And unfortunately, a lot of nurses are not taught this. They're not taught to question. They're not taught to involve the family as much because there's a lot of litigation. Unfortunately, we live in a very litigious society. So a lot of times people are very scared to speak up because they're afraid whether the patient or family is going to take offense. And then a lot of doctors have a hard time going outside of the protocols that they are taught. I would say that most of them do not mean to be the way they are because they are only taught a certain way. But as things progress in healthcare, it's no longer an excuse when we have lots of us coming forward and bringing these things to them to identify that you are a partner in collaboration and decision making. They don't just get to say anything and it goes. With that being said, the patients and family need to take accountability for their care and know that if you do decide to refuse something, which you have the right to, the doctors can also refuse to do certain things or the plan of care may change. So it's just really understanding those nitty gritty things that a lot of people don't know because you don't understand or don't really navigate the healthcare system like that. And since I've been in it for so long, that's what the certification helps me bridge the gap between healthcare and the legalities of you being in an unfamiliar situation and what you can actually say yes and no to.
Yeah, and I love all that because I think that is so very important that and one of the things like I empower my clients and my community to do is to be able to before going to an appointment, not necessarily a hospital, which if I had time, with the hospital situation, I would do the same thing, but help them to formulate questions so that when they go in, they are armed with things to ask. And I will say, just from experience, a lot of physicians don't like that, and
Right.
that's okay. And they don't like it because they are only taught one way. And like you just
Yes.
said, which this has been something on my mind probably over a year, they do take an oath to do no harm. And I don't believe that anybody does things with an intent to harm.
Right.
But then there comes a point where you're a human being, you have a brain, you should be getting higher education, you should be going back and taking courses, you should be interested enough in your field to do your own research. I am not a, physician, but I can tell you that I've done so many deep dives for my children's health that when I would go to pediatricians, they looked at me like I had 8 heads. And I'm like, it's really disturbing that I'm bringing forth this information to you and you're not even interested in like hearing it, let alone
Right.
learning it for yourself. So to me, that is doing harm. If you're
Right.
not in a place of growth the entire
Yes.
time you're in that career, then you need to exit the career.
I
It's
agree.
it's the same with teaching. I mean, different
Yes.
level, but it's like in teaching, things continue to change and evolve, and you
Right.
need to change and evolve along with everything. And I do think since the pandemic, there are a lot more people that are using their voices. They are speaking out now. They have seen something that changed something within them that they can't just sit quietly any longer.
Right.
So, and again, I love what you're doing in the industry because you're not just doing the status quo, and we need more people like you. And I don't know how that can change. I do think that like medical schooling is going to change at some point. I hear a lot of, talk about, at least getting some nutritional stuff in there
Right.
because they don't have anything, but they also need to understand vaccines.
Right.
They're just given a schedule and their schedule is this and they're not told what's in the vaccines. They're
Correct.
not told, that it's not a one size fits everybody. And I can tell you from again personal experience, genetics matter. If
Yes.
you have certain genetics, those things are a lot more toxic than to somebody who doesn't have that same genetic profile.
Exactly.
So I feel so strongly that kids at birth, every single baby that's born, first thing should have a genetic test because we can learn so much about that baby and that child because genetics don't change. Epigenetics change, but genetics we
Right.
can learn from, and then we can help to tailor medicine to that child and not just here every baby's going to get this, this, and this.
Exactly.
because not everybody's bio individual. So
It's true.
I did hear that they were pulling back the financial incentives for
Yes.
vaccines in pediatricians' offices and things like that. And I think, again, I don't, I try to be like, I try to have a belief that that wasn't the reason why it first started. But then you have to constantly wonder, the dollar matters. And so if you're getting kicked out of your pediatrician's office because you're not complying,
Right.
then you're not caring for that patient. You're caring about the dollar in your wallet. And so I have
Yes.
like a big thing with that. So when I saw that, I knew I wanted to bring it up because it's exciting to me that,
It is.
again, I've been, I'm 50 years old, 50, too, and I haven't been a very political person, and I still don't think this is a political issue. I think this is a
Right.
human rights issue.
Yes.
And to see things shifting for the first time, it's exciting. We still have a long, long, long way to go, but at least we've taken one, I call them 1% shifts. At least we're taking these shifts in different categories of health and wellness. There's lots of buckets, but at
Right.
least we're starting somewhere. And I think that's exciting for 2026. I mean, this week, getting back to it, I'm like, okay, all these great things
Yeah,
are
I
happening.
know.
I'm like, ah. So, one of the things, well, first of all, how do you feel about the incentives being rolled back and that pressure not being put on
Right.
doctors?
Well, I mean, it's very exciting. One of the things that we need to remember is that, these individuals, meaning in healthcare, the healthcare providers, they're not God, but a lot of them may have some egos that we need to kind of work through. And, like you said, especially in healthcare, we're always evolving. Science is forever changing. And that should not be threatening when individuals want to have a sit down conversation and try to deep dive a little bit more into what's going on. And that's what we tend to see. There's a little bit of, like you said, hostility, or, they don't want to feel like they're being questioned. And really, at the end of the day, it's forming that patient and physician relationship to understand one another. And, two things can always be true. And that's what I always say, just because we may not go one way does not mean that we can't meet in the middle, or there can't be an alternative that we can try, see if that works. And then if it doesn't, go to plan B. And so hearing that we were rolling back that incentive, well, in the first place, should have never have happened. Like you said, I don't think, in the beginning that was the true intent. However, because of the way insurance companies are, and because of the, again, metrics that everybody's supposed to follow in healthcare, a lot of these physicians, for the listeners, must understand they're not really taught to think for themselves. They're only taught to follow protocols and the guidelines. They really have no other way to go outside of the box. And if they do, then there could be penalties. And this is why a lot of times they don't do it. So to know that the pediatricians have the opportunity to decline care to children, to me, is unethical. It is
Mhm.
something that we tried to address last session in Florida, where that was a bill that we were trying to place into law, that healthcare providers could not refuse care, because to me, that's a form of discrimination. And it was more specific to children who either didn't get vaccinated or maybe wanted a delayed schedule. And because it's a free market, unfortunately, providers can refuse. So hearing that the incentives are not in place should help. There's a lot of things that go with it. What I say that they're making a ton of money off of this? No, but it's enough to where it makes you question what exactly is the reasoning behind pushing the vaccines. They will always say public health, but as you and I both know, public health means different things. It does not just mean injecting someone's child with a vaccine with unknown toxins and the lack of informed consent. And, just briefly with the informed consent, which is something I'm very huge on, it is a right to the individual that and have a clear understanding of the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, the consequences, and basically having the ability to make a decision on if you want to move forward with something. And for those that may not know, when you receive vaccines, 9 times out of 10, you are not receiving full informed consent. You are being told that it's due on the child's schedule. This is what it's for. We're going to go ahead and give it. And if the child has a fever or doesn't feel well, go ahead and give Tylenol. That is not informed consent. If they told you that there was formaldehyde, aborted fetal cells, all these other ingredients that are, the aluminum, that's toxic to a child that's only a few days or a few weeks old, and then it could cause, neurological issues, Guillain-Barré, febrile seizures, or death, would you still think that the risk versus benefit would imply that this is appropriate in a first world country? A lot of parents looking back will say no, that they would not have agreed to do that. And so this is why it's imperative that we promote informed consent and make it mandatory that every parent and adult who's going to be given a vaccine know all of the information at hand. And if you still feel comfortable and you feel that your risk versus benefit is there, that you are able to receive that vaccine with zero coercion, and understand that even with that, there is not a single person in the manufacturer, for the vaccine that is responsible for any poor outcomes. Meaning the 1986 Act is in place. It is still in place, meaning that manufacturers cannot be held liable for vaccine injuries. And that is the only product on the market that has these types of product liability shields. And it's very important that everybody understands that. The only way you could work around it is potentially suing the government, which is almost next to impossible. And then knowing that there's a VICP and a CICP, which typically denies individuals who are injured. And unfortunately, it's up and coming how many people are actually vaccine injured. So it's very important that although the incentives are being dropped, that we also know there's a lot more that comes with this that individuals need to know may still happen, because state does supersede federal when it comes to certain laws and mandates and things like that. So we still have to be very keen on what's happening in your state and understand what your rights are.
So a couple of things. If you're listening, the first question I want to ask for you guys to kind of think about is the last time you went to, if you're older, get a COVID vaccine or a flu vaccine or um, pneumonia vaccine, I don't know, whatever's for older people. Or if you've taken your child, if you have younger children, to the doctor and there is something on the schedule. I just want you to really think about the scene and the conversation with your doctor, because all of the things that Nicole just said, the risks versus they are in the insert, but we are never shown as a patient or an advocate for the child as a patient. They never give you that insert.
No.
And they never teach you what's in the insert. And until I guess maybe 2 years ago, I was very unaware as well. And it was infuriating to me when I actually found out that a pediatrician would not tell a parent who's believing, because they are a doctor and they have been taught, and you think that they have your best interest, you think governmental things are in place to all have your best interests, which obviously is unraveling as we speak. But, I just want you to think about those visits that you've had. And if you haven't had those conversations, it's not our fault, but let's make change going forward. So informed consent is something I really wanted to dive into with Nicole, because I don't even know that a lot of people understand what that actually means. And so the way she explained it beautifully. And I want us to be able to walk away from today's episode really feeling empowered to ask the questions and it is vaccines, but it's also medication.
Right.
It's also what's on your food. Like, it's also what's in your water, what's in the sky. All of these things matter for us to be our healthiest version. And we are kind of just aimlessly walking through life in chaos,
right,
which is probably on purpose, but and so we don't have time to think about all of these things. And I get it's overwhelming. It is, because it's new to us. It's something that we haven't really had to ever think about because it wasn't brought to light. But what's on your food matters just as much as what kind of food and the quality of your food. So it's not, just one thing, it's all things. So we just have to get more intentional and ask better questions so that we can have the informed consent to make the best choices. Because once you have the information, it is up to you. And there's nobody that's going to say you can't have an XYZ vaccine if you want it, or that if you want to eat that food, nothing's going to be not what's the opposite of mandated?
Or are you talking about forced
Yeah,
or
well, no, like nothing's going to be like completely ever taken away.
oh, right. Yes.
So you're going to always have the right to
The
choose.
option, right.
So, and that's part of being a human, right? We should have the
Right.
right to choose. So, um, with the whole vaccine, if you're unaware, there was just a shift in the vaccine schedule. There was a mandate for them to look at our schedule versus other countries' schedules.
Right.
And what they found was we have an astronomical amount of doses that we give versus other countries. And something Nicole mentioned was in 1986, they created this act that basically took all of the liability off of the manufacturers. So if someone is not fearful, that's if they do wrong or if they create something that could be harmful, if nothing can be done to them, they're going to be a little more lackadaisical, I feel like.
Right.
So that somehow, I don't know how that's going to work out, but I know that God will put something in place that was going to remove that. But we're going through right now the same thing, which we'll hit on in a second. But the pesticide thing, that's
Right.
another area that is kind of going through the same, trying to go through the same thing. But I really feel like it's not going to work out for them, hopefully. But once that mandate got put in place, the amount of doses and the amount of vaccines went up since 1986.
Right.
So for those that are not informed about it, I think it went from 17 different vaccines to 11. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
17 to 11.
And then the dosages went from 78 to 23.
It went to like the 72 to low 20s, which is quite significant.
It is.
And it's to align better with some of the European countries and how they vaccinate. And it kind of reduces the need for some of these vaccines that were being recommended yearly versus, getting a booster or maybe a series of vaccines, going from 2 to 3 down to 1, and then really scrutinizing the significance of which ones we're pushing or recommending, if you will. And, again, to the listeners, you can still vaccinate exactly how you want to. It's just going to change the recommendations from the 72 doses down to the 20s. And, again, everything is a risk versus benefit. And so you really have to look at the schedule and see, for instance, with the hepatitis B vaccine, it never made sense to have a hepatitis B vaccine introduced to an infant that's maybe a few hours old if the mother was not a hepatitis B carrier. And most mothers are tested for this. And so you're giving a vaccine that's typically seen and given for individuals that have IV drug use or promiscuous sex or comes in contact with infected blood. And you're giving this to an infant that has no reason to receive it necessarily based on the history of the mother. And statistics show that it is almost next to zero. You've heard a child contract hepatitis B. And so, as Robin was saying, we want to make sure that people understand that there's always accountability on what you decide to choose and understand that there are risks involved. And with that, how are you going to navigate the risk if something was to happen? So the informed consent is really important so that you understand not only like what you're receiving, why are you receiving it, what is it trying to protect you from? Is this something statistically speaking that you could have an issue with or adverse outcomes versus the actual information within the inserts that will tell you what studies have been done. And just to clarify, to date, which is one of the reasons why we have been screaming in the MAHA movement and for decades now, that there's not a single study on the market that has a true placebo test done or blind double study, placebo testing of a vaccine with saline. We don't have it. It doesn't exist. The only trials that they've done are against other vaccines, which are not true placebo testing. And so you cannot say without a shadow of doubt, and why a lot of physicians are shielded from this immunity as well when they give these vaccines, because there's never been a test to show that you can give hepatitis B, MMR, the flu, all of these other ones together and that be safe. And when you have these things injected, you can't really tell exactly which one caused it. So that is another thing that we're calling for: transparency, making sure we have better testing done, safety signals done, and making sure that that information is not hidden behind paywalls, and that you're able to see that as the consumer, if you will, to know, okay, is this appropriate for me or not?
And one of the things that came out with that change in schedule is the commitment to figure out how to do the testing. If you have not yet watched the Inconvenience Study by Del Bigtree and the Highwire, I highly recommend it. It doesn't try to like push a narrative one way or another. It really just is information and it's exposure of truth. And it's not telling you that vaccines are horrible. It's just giving you facts for you, again, to be educated
Right.
and to understand, like Nicole was saying, that there really hasn't been the testing, the right testing done to actually be able to 100% say this is a safe product. I don't know that you can necessarily ever say anything is 100% because I
Right.
do believe genetics do play, and
Yes.
their kids' immune systems and how they are in general, and their environment and all of the other factors. But
Yes.
that is where the informed consent comes in. If you know and you know about your own child, then you can make a better choice.
Yes.
The other thing that I talk a lot about is low tox and body burden and things like that. And so, just to draw a picture, every time you get an injection or you take a medication or you are exposed to a toxin, whether that be through your water or plastics or, all of the different toxins that are, could be in our home, your body accumulates them. And so as it accumulates, for some kids, if you think of a bucket, if that bucket fills all the way up, you're going to have a reaction. And if you don't methylate properly, if you don't detox properly, if your body is immune compromised, things like that, you have a harder time doing that. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about it, it's not even necessarily the vaccine. To me, it's what's created in the vaccine. What's the
Right.
adjuvants? What are the things that
Yes.
make up? So that's where I want us to focus, is like on the ingredients, because ingredients matter, and ingredients.
Yes.
And I think when they are revamping, I don't think it's going to happen overnight, but some of these things need to be reformulated, if you will, to
Yes.
a safer way of giving something, if it truly would be beneficial for a disease and
Right.
et cetera, that it's supposed to help. Um, but
I think
again,
that's
go
I
ahead.
think that's a really good point that you're making, because one of the things that we're constantly met with is, oh, there's a bunch of anti-vaxxers and anti-science, and everybody is just thinking they know better. But the pandemic has a lot of silver linings to it, that although there was so much tragedy and darkness, there was a lot of light that came out of this. And it showed people a different side of a lot of things that had been going on that people just were not aware of. And so, to that, I like to tell people, if you did not want to push all these people to such a drastic side to say that they're just anti everything now, then it should be a point of yours to want to better the processes and these, like you said, ingredients, and change it so that maybe this will open the eyes of others to trust science, to trust medicine again, and feel more comfortable leaning towards the vaccines, or, like you said, other things that are going on. Because, and unfortunately, all of these things are affected: the soil, the water, the air, our food, what's being put in our bodies with the vaccines. And if you are not up to speed with it, or you don't involve yourself in some of this information and show up to your local and state meetings, and really understand what's happening, it is going to happen without your consent. And no one is going to want to do better because you're not giving them a reason to challenge it. And so this is why it's so important that we're not necessarily saying you shouldn't do this or this is not a good idea. It's, we want you to care. We want you to show up. We want you to use your voice and feel empowered to see what's going on and say, hey, I have questions on this, and that's just where I stand. So let's start working towards bettering these products and these outcomes, so that maybe you won't have so many people that are quote unquote anti-science, anti-vax.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of a, at this point, ironic, comical, whatever you want to call it, like the anti. It's, if you don't follow in line with whatever it is that's the protocol, then you're
Right.
anti everything. So, and
Yes.
I think again that is gross, and it
Yes.
takes away your right to think. it takes away, your right to make decisions for yourself and your family. Like, for children, the parent, is the advocate and the health everything
Yes.
until they are 18. And
Right.
still at 18, they're not adults. I can just assure you of that.
Yep.
So, but to take that right away from a parent and to tell me as a parent that this is going to happen, or I'm going to be in trouble, or that's very frightening, as a
Yes.
parent. There's a lot of things that need to change, but I'm excited for the steps we're taking. Florida in particular, which we both live in, we're doing a good job at trying to take away some of the things to make people want to trust a little bit
Right.
more. And again, people, their uh counter to, like, if we don't mandate something, is no one's going to get it. And that's false, because if you
That's
look at
false.
other states, if you look at other countries, the numbers are not down, because they
Right.
trust, because they're making decisions, because someone is showing them the
Right.
evidence and the facts that makes them believe and want to, and it's okay to do. And I think, again, that's where we're needing to get to, because right now, after all that fiasco that happened, there's still a lot of people that do just blindly trust, and that's
Right.
okay. They'll get there in their time. I believe everybody comes into their own time in their
Right.
own time, depending on whatever their walk is. So I do want to talk a little bit, because when I first met you, one of the things you were talking about at um the White or not the White House, but at the Tallahassee, at the state capitol,
Capital.
was Cody's Law.
Yes.
So for a lot of people, and for myself as well, I did not understand or know the capacity of vaccine injuries that did take place during the pandemic time frame.
Yes.
And my first encounter was first through Bree Drexler. She was on one of
Dressing.
my calls, and I was really sad after the call, because I really
Yeah.
just had absolutely no idea. And I'm like, if I have no idea, 90% of people have no idea. And the more
Yes.
I kind of started to get informed and learn about it, and then I ran into you, and then you guys were doing Cody's Law. So I just want to use that conversation, if you could. I want people to understand what has been taking place for
Right.
someone like Cody, because it's
Absolutely.
not good.
Well, and so, again, I'm not necessarily anti-vax. I'm pro informed consent. And so I want people to understand that where this is drastically happening to more people than most would imagine, it's not going to happen to everybody. So I want to just make that very clear. Cody is in his early 20s. His name is Cody Hudson. I met him and his mother early on in the pandemic. He was talked into getting the Pfizer vaccine by a family member who was high up in the medical field. He did have some coercion about it and wasn't quite sure at first he wanted to, but he did, and immediately had significant reactions. He is probably one of the most well-published vaccine injuries in the state of Florida and beyond. His information has traveled across the world, and that's due to his mother, Heather Hudson, who I work closely with to raise awareness on vaccine injuries actually exist. For those of you that are listening, I am vaccinated up until a certain point. I have children that are vaccinated up until a certain point. I had exposure to vaccine injuries with a brother of mine who I'm sure is severely vaccine injured from the MMR vaccine. He has profound autism. He changed at his 1 to 2 year mark of receiving it. And we were always told it wasn't it. One of the words I wanted to bring up when you were talking about something earlier was we use the word gaslighting. Gaslighting happens a lot in the healthcare field, where we kind of downplay or tell people that how they're feeling or what they may be going through is not necessarily really happening, and it minimizes what's going on, and that term is gaslighting. And so the vaccine injured were on my mind because I could see the death that was happening from the vaccines from my heart transplant patients. I saw it in front of my eyes, which is what made me come forward. So when I started to get involved on a local and state level, I ended up meeting Heather and Cody. And the original thought process was back in 2022, 2023, was we were representing COVID-19 vaccine mandates, what it meant to be a healthcare worker, because I was being coerced, I was losing jobs. If I stood up against it, I was being blacklisted. There were a lot of things happening, which is why healthcare workers just complied because they made our life really horrible. And when we went to the state capitol back then to represent COVID-19 injuries and mandates, I was met with an influx of hundreds of parents who came in solidarity to stand with us for their children over the years that had been vaccine injured. And when I tell you, it hit me like a freight train to see the level of injury on the children's side based on childhood vaccines and their stories, and no one believing them, and pediatricians dropping their care, and these children that are now left in some cases permanently damaged, requiring around the clock care for the rest of their life, and there's no one to help them. There's nothing in place for these individuals. It was very apparent at that time how important this was, and how it not only involved COVID-19 vaccine injuries, but also children and childhood vaccines. And so when we went there, we went in solidarity, and Cody's Law is a bill proposal that unfortunately did not get brought to the floor this year due to Senator Colleen Burton, who had a different agenda. She refused to bring it forward despite both House and Senate representation. And we also had both Republican and Democrat support because of the controversy or controversial nature of this subject. Anytime we talk about vaccines or their dangers and bring it to legislation, there's a lot of things that go with it that are not very well received. And so Cody's Law is a bill proposal to, one, identify that vaccine injuries exist, not just COVID-19, but childhood vaccine injuries as well, and to implement the Medicare and Medicaid programs that are already in place to give diagnosis codes that may relate to a vaccine injury, whether it's myocarditis, pericarditis, Guillain-Barré, POTS, certain things that are trigger words that doctors can feel safe to diagnose, because it's still very taboo and they are discouraged from putting someone as a vaccine injury into the system, so that Medicare and Medicaid programs can help these individuals receive care and in a timely fashion. The state would not necessarily have to come out of any more money. It's already allotted in programs. It's just getting those individuals to qualify. Most of them, as I mentioned previously, the CICP and the VICP, for every vaccine that's given, a certain percentage goes into the vaccine injury program that 98% of people who apply are denied. So even though they're vaccine injured and it's documented, the federal court system can shoot it down, and a lot of times it does not go forward. So then they go to the CICP, which is a type of medical compensation program that a lot of them also get denied. So these people are hurt. They have little to no quality of life. They're becoming disabled. They have all these issues and medical needs, and they're being told that they don't exist. We have physicians that are too afraid to diagnose, and then we have programs that are not in place for them. So it tends to add to the burden of our healthcare sector that's already broken and causes a further decline in their health. So Cody's Law is to implement these things to help these individuals receive acknowledgement and timely care. And because of the mishandling of this bill earlier this session, it has now been pushed to a federal level where we have federal support, and we have individuals working behind the scenes to help us get this brought so that not only Florida can benefit, but hopefully other states across the United States. So I will tell you, there is nothing more strong than a mother who is watching her son slowly die because of a quote unquote safe and effective product, unfortunately. And so it's really near and dear to my heart, and it does involve everyone, not just COVID-19 vaccine injured individuals. And we also recognize those that are no longer with us, because part of working in the sector that I do, I have been met and faced with a lot of families who have lost their loved ones due to the COVID-19 vaccine, other vaccines, and the deadly hospital protocols. So we continue to get these individuals' names out there and try to make sure that people understand that they are real, not rare, and that we are trying to advocate so that they can have some sort of quality of life and be productive members of society.
So, first of all, thank you for doing all of that because it's not easy. It's emotional. I'm sure wrecks you on a daily
Yeah.
with what you've seen and what you go through. You're extremely strong. And I know you're a fighter and a warrior and a Taurus. So I know that, you have it in you, but no matter how strong you are, things like this emotionally take people down. So make sure
Yes.
that you're giving yourself a lot of self-care and
Amen.
time and all of the things, because without that, you won't be your best version.
Right.
And so one of the things that really disturbed me about the Cody situation, which I'm sure it's not just Cody, I'm sure it's a lot of others. Not only is it the non-believing part of it,
Yes.
but there is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a not protocol, but something that he could potentially get to try to help him, but it's extremely expensive.
Yes.
And he has no health care that can help him to
Right.
offset some of that cost.
Right.
And to me, along with like the Drexler, like
Brie Dressen.
Dressen, sorry.
Yes.
Um, what happened to that group of people that were, the volunteers that kind of came
Yes.
forward and that were promised help, if anything, was to
Right.
that to me in a first, it's just gross.
Yes.
And gross is, a very like, it's the only nice word I can kind of think of.
Right.
But it's disturbing
Yes.
that there could be something to potentially, especially like for him in his 20s, to try to rectify a little bit of his life so that he could at least have something, better.
Right.
And we're denying it. Why?
So that's
And
a yeah. I mean, it's a very valid question, and so for those that are listening, there's a lot of animosity in this movement. There's a lot of heartbreak. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of resentment. A lot of people that meet some of these very significantly vaccine injured individuals have a hard time taking these individuals because when I tell you they've lost everything, they've lost everything. And without making it too deep, a lot of them are no longer with us because they
Mhm.
just cannot handle not having resources. They've lost jobs, they've lost friends. Nobody wants to deal with somebody who's sick all the time, and they don't feel like they have a purpose, and they're literally abandoned. And so a lot of times these individuals are trying to speak out, but are very sick, and can't really muster enough strength to do anything. And the government has abandoned them.
Mhm.
More government interference is never a good thing. And when these things were put in place as a mandate, people felt they had no other option. And again, there's so many reasons why someone may have taken a vaccine. And again, there's a lot of people that are like, well, they chose that's on them, they should have known better. We're not there at this point. As humanity, we need to be able to come together and understand, as much as that may be true, we cannot move forward if we keep focusing on why somebody did something. The outcome now is, I believe, millions, yes, I'm saying millions across the globe are vaccine injured, especially from the COVID-19 vaccine, especially since we don't have studies that show long-term effects. And we have roughly 5 to 9 million children in the United States that at least have had one COVID-19 vaccine, with zero studies to show what these outcomes will be. So to know that there is so much harm and adverse outcomes in these vaccines across the board, and that we have people so sick that are trying to get help. And like you said, there are things out there, but they're considered alternatives. They're not FDA approved. Most countries are trying different things that the United States is not. Cody had the opportunity to travel outside of the United States to Japan. There was an up and coming treatment. It costs, it's extremely expensive. And, when you have somebody that's vaccine injured to his level, he has a significant clotting disorder. His case is considered terminal. He cannot fly for long periods of time. He has to be moving, like he's high risk for blood clots. So even to get him over somewhere is a problem. And so we've looked at different things in different states and outside of the United States, but it's not just people it's not just Cody, excuse me. There's so many people like Cody that are in the same boat and they're not able to get this treatment because it's so costly. And then the other side to this, and I hate to say it, but just putting it out there are people that take advantage of these people. And that's another reason why I come in the way that I do, because I protect these individuals when we represent them in certain situations that people are trying to take advantage of them for their stories and promising them things that they do not get, and then saying they're going to do fundraisers that never reach them. I mean, we're talking a whole other level of things that most people don't understand happen. So it's very complex, and it's unfortunate that we do have things that could help, but because insurance doesn't cover it, because the programs are not required to accept them, they go without. And when they go without, their conditions deteriorate. And one of my very good friends, Carolina Stancic, is one of the young military individuals who got the Moderna vaccine and significantly was injured. And now she is 24, 25 years old with a pacemaker because she was gaslit for years. The VA didn't address her concerns. She was too young. And they ended up having to admit in a memorandum in October of 2023 that the government forced these vaccines on her. And that is what caused her to have the heart attacks and the weakened heart muscle that caused her to also have POTS. And she passed out on a flight of cement stairs, injured her spine. When they found out she was passing out, they ended up putting a monitor on her. It took a few times. Her and I worked together. We had a plan. They'd finally put in a loop recorder and they captured that she was having 5+ second pauses, and immediately were like, "You're 24 years old, but you need to come in. We have to put in a pacemaker." People don't think this happens. They think this is absolutely insane. And I'm telling you, it happens every day, and it's continuing to happen. And why it's so important that we're trying to avoid them going years without treatment and getting so much worse that now some of these individuals are beyond, it's to the point where it's almost palliative care. And it's just heartbreaking because we see a lot of things with MAID and different programs that are being put into place. And these individuals are being told there are no options. There's nothing to save you. So we have to do something as a society. And that's why we are trying to push Cody's Law as a start to help try to prevent this happening to others.
Yeah. And for those listening, we're not telling you all of this to like draw a dreary picture.
Right.
We're telling you this because we want you to be informed. We
Correct.
want you to really understand. Some people took it and they're completely fine,
Right.
or they think they are. And we have no idea because, again,
Right.
you don't know long term because it was not studied long term.
Right.
And if you took it, there's no right or wrong because you
Right.
had to go with your gut choice. You had to go with
Right.
how you felt. But we don't know what the long-term outcomes are. They're starting to, we're 5 years in at this point, 4 years. you know there are some studies coming out showing different things. So for you guys listening, I just want you to be informed. I just want you to keep your eyes and ears open. If you don't feel good, if you have something, don't ignore anything, because at this point, everything is everything, right? And so
Right.
the longer you go without, and again, the gaslighting will happen somewhat because people want to not deal with it, but also it's unbelievable, right? A 24-year-old shouldn't be having these things. So for that, again, we have to listen to our own intuition, and people
Yes.
in midlife get this. You go and you're like, I have all these things, and then you get tested and everything's fine. It's like, but
Right.
I'm not fine. Like something
Right.
doesn't feel right. So if you've been on that journey, that is similar. You have to really listen to your intuition. You have to understand what other people have gone through.
Exactly.
And it's not 5 people, it's a lot of people. And really, I guess I'm just saying, I'm asking just for you to pray for those people, because that's
Right.
what we can do right now. And where you find a space that you can use your voice, every voice matters.
Yes.
You don't have to know everything, but you can stand up for other people that don't have a voice or have a very low voice at this point, if they are injured or if they're sick. Um, could be within your family, it could be outside your
Right.
family. It doesn't really matter. We all have to come together as a society to continue through this. And even though we are so many years past and into other things, we cannot forget these people that have had, severe injuries and saying their name, talking about the person, just learning about a handful of them and just praying for them. I think that's something that we can all walk away today at least doing. That's the minimum. But if you are somebody that has a gut instinct, get involved in your local and state. It is important. I didn't realize how important it was really until things started mattering to me.
Right.
So I think everybody gets there in their own time. But I appreciate everything you've done and that you continue to do. And again, I want to make sure you're always caring for yourself first because, self-care is ultimately very much needed, especially when you're working in these situations that are really tough and emotional. So, but thank you for all that you do. I really, really appreciate it. And I really love hearing a little bit of your story, but let's end on two things I have. What's been your favorite moment in all of your years of nursing that has really stuck out to you as like the reason why you keep going?
Oh, there's so many. God has blessed me. I always say it's a form of survivor's guilt because I've got to be here and see things when I know so many didn't. But one of the biggest things that happened to me probably in 2022, 2023, I was a travel nurse on the East Coast of Florida, and I had a patient who was end of life. Her family was not ready to hear that. The patient really wasn't aware as much. She had a lot of health issues, and I ended up having her 3 days in a row. And she was a spitfire. The patient was just adorable, but set in her ways. And she was just a matter of fact, and I loved it. And I got to meet her two daughters, and one of them, her name is Jennifer. She clung to me and she helped, and she was always involved and asked questions. And I find out at the time that she was in nursing school. And I had never in the 17, 18 years at the time ever given my phone number to anybody that I cared for. But God was calling me to Jennifer, and it just was the weirdest thing. And I was like, oh, let's just hope this goes well. And we kind of got to the end of the 3 days, and there was hospice being brought in, and the patient was like, can you try to really just do certain things because my daughters are not handling it well, and I'm ready, I've accepted it, I understand what's happening, but like it's their mom, I get it. And I just grew so close to them in a short amount of time. And so she was discharged to go home with hospice, and I received a text like 4 or 5 months later where Jennifer told me that her mom had passed. And she said, that I had this profound impact on her, and that she just absolutely loved me as a human being and what I stood for. And she was super grateful of the care that I gave her mom. And she's like, I will never be able to repay what you did for our family. And I just wanted you to know that I'm still in school. I graduate in so many months, and I'm thinking about you, and just thank you for everything. And so then a few months passed, and she sends me a picture of her in her cap and gown, and she did a speech, and she again thanked me in her speech and all this other stuff from graduating nursing school. And then 2 years later, so not too long ago, I did a video of this. She messages me, and she's on a mission trip. And she's spreading the word with her father. And she again is thanking me and just how big of an impact I had and just how grateful she was. And I want the listeners to understand that every patient I have cared for, I have never forgotten them. I have created a bond because of how much I cared and how much I treated them like my own family, that we hold on to those moments because there is so much sadness and darkness. And even though it was a really sad time that she had lost her mom, she was able to still connect with me and let me know how she was doing. And I just was so proud of her, and it just really stuck with me. So that was a huge thing for me that keeps me going.
I love that, and makes me want to cry and choke all my emotions. That just is a reminder that you just never know
Amen.
who you're
Amen.
touching, and so
Ever.
be kind.
Amen.
All right, so the last thing I ask people that I interview is just for a few non-negotiables that keeps you thriving and healthy and really working on keeping yourself in a place where you're able to continue what you do. So what do you have daily or
That's a great question. I'm probably not the best person to ask this because I am a giver through and through. And I've had to learn over the years that if you keep giving, people are going to will be willing to take. And that's not necessarily a malicious thing, but people latch on to certain things that they find comforting or that they can relate to. So for me, I have to learn to say no. And so some non-negotiables for me is spending time outside, making sure that I take time to turn on my little salt rock lava lamp and my essential oils and just try to sit and kind of debrief, if you will. I also try to read certain things scripture wise. And I really have to remind myself that just showing up every day is really the best that I can do because in this movement, not everybody makes it. We can't save everybody. And I think that is one of the hardest things that I've had to accept that that's just part of life. But again, to continue in the line of work and say their name and make sure that their stories are told, it's called giving a voice to the voiceless. And so for me, it's just remembering that there's a lot of light and dark. They go together,
Yes.
but I'm able to take some time to be in silence. My husband is absolutely amazing. He's the reason why a lot of this can be done. We do have two small children, so he always tries to make sure that I am cared for. I'm very blessed there. And so it's just trying to find time to slow down. Otherwise, we're going 24/7. There's no time to slow down because there's always something going on. But those are the things. Take time for yourself, go outside, read the word, and just try to slow down as best you can.
Yeah, and those are all great ones. So you
Yeah.
do have stuff. So you just didn't know
I
it. You
try.
just had to say it out.
Yes.
And you know what? You don't have to do it. Nobody is not looking for perfection. We're just looking for
Right.
things that we can cling on to that
Yes.
helps us find the peace, helps us find
Right.
relaxation or just that downtime. But I love what you said because I was thinking the same thing is that, in the darkness there is always light. And
Yes.
so when you're in a job like this or you're in a movement like this or you're in life in general, you always have to, when darkness creeps up, you have to remember that something will come through in the light.
Right.
And just like with Jennifer, it's like, of course, losing her mom and watching all of that. That's why I can't be a nurse because I would be a mess all over the floor all the time. But the impact that you made on her is lifelong,
Yeah.
right? And that's the
Yeah.
light. And she's spreading that, which is
Yes.
amazing. And
That's
it's
amazing.
like not just that you impacted her, but now she's taking that and it's a ripple effect.
It's
And I think
amazing.
that's beautiful. So those are the things that hopefully you hold on to as you're moving through some of the things that feel uneasy.
And just to add just really quickly, like the reason why I said some of the things earlier, and again, like you had mentioned very beautifully, it's not to deter people or to scare people. It's so that you can be more empathetic. Maybe you could see a different side. Maybe you can understand the hurt and some of the disappointment and certain things that they're going through. If it doesn't affect you like that, but like you said, Robin, to be able to use your voice and how could you maybe help these individuals that can't help themselves? It's really just putting yourself to be a kind human being and extending that hand because the world does have a lot of darkness, but there are so many good things and so many good people. It's just a matter of, putting yourself out there and recognizing that we're in this together,
Mhm.
and just making people aware that it even exists. I did not know until I saw those parents. It didn't hit me at the level that it did, and I had been in healthcare 17 years. It just wasn't on my radar. And then God made it the way that he did. And that's what I hope people take away from all these podcasts is that these people exist, they're human beings, and how can we work together? Because this is a humanity issue. This is not a right versus left. This is, it's just coexisting and being kind and wanting better for our children.
Correct. Because at this point, to me, what's done is done. We
Amen.
now know better. We can learn from things, and all of those things, but that doesn't negate and take away what has been done to certain
Right.
people and it hasn't affected you and it's not going to affect you. Great. I'm
Right.
happy. And again, everybody's so bio individual that everybody's going to react differently. But the people who did react poorly and are not getting the support they need,
Right.
that's where we can come in and be a little bit kinder. And I think in this world where we have a lot of people on a certain agenda or a lot of people that are have egos to put
Yes.
in place and things like that, we need to voice up the people who are not and
Yes.
really like try to bring that temperature down
Amen.
so that we can have a better I mean, we are the United States of America, and I would like to try to act like it. Because sometimes I'm like, where are we living? But anyways, I want to leave on the
Yes.
note of all of your good things that you're doing for yourself, but also, for the world around you. And so as you guys leave today, if you're not getting a few 1% shifts, you need to call me.
Yeah.
But I would love to know what you guys are taking away, because I think it's important to have conversations, be in community with people that want to have conversations. So you can either leave a comment below, you can always reach out on Instagram, DM. You guys have my email. I'll drop everything in the show notes where you can find Nurse Nicole and follow her, so that you can get educated, because this is what this show is about. It's about education. It's about empowerment. It's about knowing how to use your voice properly and getting the care and the health that you want and deserve. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to y'all soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
That episode had so many great takeaways. I hope you feel inspired and more empowered to make small 1% shifts on your wellness journey this week. I'd love to hear what resonated with you. If you want to leave a review, share your thoughts, and let me know how you're going to be implementing these 1% shifts into your life. And don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with another mama who could use a little wellness love. Want to stay connected? Join me on Instagram and Facebook at Live Life Balanced with Robin. Check out my website at livelifebalancedwithrobin.com for more resources, and grab yourself some freebies while you're there. Until next time, I hope you find peace, love, and light by breathing, being present, and allowing for all possibilities to come your way. See y'all next week. Love to y'all.